Chapter 2, Denial, a long, dark tunnel of guilt, anger, and frustration. You're right, I am a terrible person. After the preschool fiasco, I sat around and moped the rest of the afternoon. I had no desire to do anything except lay on the couch. I was about 5 months along in my pregnancy. My rounding stomach felt uncomfortable, and changing positions helped. Dan returned home from a tiring day of work and had an upcoming grueling 3-day CPA exam on his mind. As he rounded the driveway, he noted the burned-out spots on the lawn, the weeds, and the toys scattered around.
Reaching the glass screen door, he grimaced at the hundreds of small fingerprints on it. Our half-dressed 5-year-old daughter, Cindy, with uncombed hair and dirty face, met him at the door. Just then he bent down to pick up our 2-year-old daughter, Heidi, but was greatly dismayed when Heidi's wet diaper soaked the sleeve of his suit.
"Patty," Dan asked, "what is going on here? The kids are a mess and the lawn is looking terrible. Have you watered it today?" Watering the lawn had been the least of my worries this particular day, and his comment only made me mad enough to want to duke it out with him, and I retorted, "Why don't you ever turn the sprinklers on yourself?" The battle was on, but not for long. I hated fighting, and besides, I had allowed Dan to play the parent figure in my life for so long that whatever he said must be right anyway. "You're right," the martyr in me admitted as I melted back into the kitchen chair. "I'm a terrible wife. I'm a horrible mother. I just can't do anything right." The girls followed Dan to the family room downstairs, and I retreated to the bedroom. My program for success was backfiring. In the preceding year, I had been involved in Amway, a multi-level business selling many products, as well as running my preschool and daycare. I had listened to dozens of motivational tapes and even made a tape of my own that talked about what I wanted my life to be like. I tried to listen to it every day and visualize myself achieving the things I talked about on the tape, such as, "When my husband comes home at night to our clean and organized home, I come to him with love in my heart, my arms, and my soul. He embraces me with warmth. And I take good care of myself. I wear makeup and look terrific." Or, "I am a loving, patient, and kind mother. I make the time to listen and help." And, "When I share products with others, they appreciate my efforts to help them and reward me with their business. My income increases daily." My imagination might have made all these things bright and beautiful, but in reality, Johnny did pick up his chair and spin it around. Dan did not come home to a clean and organized home, and he did not embrace me with warmth. I did not go to him with anything but tiredness and a feeling of being overwhelmed. I was not a patient mother, and products, well, at the moment, that was far from my mind. I hit a wall. All of my carefully laid plans, my lovingly created affirmation tapes, and my good intentions came crumbling down around me. It wasn't till later that I learned that affirmation tapes could only be helpful if they did not set me up for failure. They must be realistic, allow for the humanness of life, and encourage progress, not perfection, and should include phrases such as, "I am learning and becoming because this life is a process." I found it is best if they also include, "If thy will be done," and "in thine own time." I haven't met the test. Usually when I was hurt or upset, if I took the time to think about things, I was able to calm down and think more rationally. This time, however, instead of pulling myself together, I felt the very seams of my soul break and strain. I sat alone in my darkened room and reasoned, if my husband thinks I am terrible, then God himself must be ashamed of me. The Patty Perfect person I once believed in, the one who could win votes if she just tried hard enough, was tired of trying. She had faded and melted away like mountain snow on a hot summer's day. I lost all track of time and space in the hour after Dan and the girls went downstairs. For the first time, I seriously believed that no matter how hard I tried, I could never make Dan or the girls happy, let alone anyone else. In my bottomless despair, I came to the conclusion that I had just failed the test of life, the test of becoming perfect. Torrents of tears coursed down my face as dozens of lists of expectations I had created and failed to achieve came forcibly to my mind. As my supply of tears ebbed, I felt emptiness, a desperate need for my body to rest, yet an absolute need to get away from the pressure. There was nothing left of the enthusiastic preschool teacher, the creative mom, or the thoughtful wife, only a great vacancy. I knew I could never live up to what Dan and the girls wanted or needed, so I decided that the best thing to do was to leave so they could find a better wife and mother, one who could meet their needs better. I am told that there is a fight or flight response in each of us that automatically kicks in when we are in danger, whether real or perceived. I had no fight left in me, so that fall evening I put on one of Dan's old coats because I could no longer get mine around my tummy, and I walked out the door, not knowing where I was going. I only knew that I had to leave. I walked along a highway that was lined with homes on one side and pale, yellow, lifeless fields on the other. I considered spending the night in the field, but I knew the old coat wouldn't be warm enough for the two of us, my tummy and I, at least not for the whole night. I walked along the road for what felt like years. It was well past 11 p.m. when I finally walked up to the only house with a light on. I wondered what the people there would think when they saw a pregnant woman with a tear-stained face standing on their doorstep, asking for a place to sleep. What would be on the other side of this door? God must have lit my way because the kind woman who answered the door invited me in. She said her husband worked graveyard shifts and wouldn't be home until morning. Because of this, she was able to give me her full attention. I asked her to call Dan and tell him that I was safe. She then spent the next few hours listening to me when I was talked out and exhausted. She let me sleep on the cot, perched on the cement floor of her basement. Back home to Mommy. Despite the kindness of my hostess, my extreme emotional fatigue refused to let me sleep. I kept looking at the cold moon outside of the basement window. Finally, at 5 a.m., I crept upstairs to call my sister, Leanne, who came and picked me up. She was going through marital problems at the time, and I figured that she would understand my feelings. Leanne took me to her house and heard me rehash my story and then sent me to bed to get some rest. In a few hours when I got up, she suggested that I call Mom. "But Leanne," I pled, "I came to you because I didn't want Mom knowing about this. I don't want her to know." "I won't say anything to Mom unless you agree," she assured me. "But I don't think she'll condemn you. She can probably be a bigger help to you than I can." By mid-afternoon, I had called my friend Donna, who worked in the home daycare and preschool with me, and I told her that I wouldn't be able to continue. She was kind and agreed to call the parents and my other employees and let them know that I had to quit. Next, I dialed Mom and Dad's number. Mom came to get me, and then called Dan to let him know where I was. My hands shook as once again I told her my story. The more I shared my feelings, the more my whole body shook. That afternoon we went to the movies to help get my mind off of my dilemma, but everything I saw on the screen made me compare my situation to the perfection I saw on the screen. In the end, I was more convinced than ever that I was a failure and that my situation was hopeless. By the time we got home, I was talking in disjointed sentences, and I continued to shake and shiver. At last, I found a few hours of sleep in the house where I grew up. Although Mom and Dad nourished and loved me, I knew that I would eventually have to go back to Dan, the girls, and the pressure. By the third day, with the help of a kind, gentle, and loving church leader, as well as my parents, we decided that it was time for me to return home, thinking Dan would never understand. Our thoughtful and dedicated church leader picked me up, and as he drove me the 5 miles to my house, I explained to him that I was afraid to return because I was sure Dan didn't care about me and would never understand why I had to leave. He quietly assured me that he would be there with us as we patched things up. Patch things up, I mused as I looked out the window. How can you patch up an impossible situation? How can I ever be what Dan expects me to be? Fear took over my mind and my head. I nearly backed out, but he encouraged me to walk up the pathway to our front door. The house was strangely clean and quiet. The kids were somewhere else, and I kept my eyes on the floor as I sat down on a couch on the opposite side of the living room from Dan. Our church friend began this meeting with prayer, yet as I lifted my eyes, I seemed to read in Dan's eyes what I feared most. A thick, protective cloud erected to conceal his true thoughts. What was he thinking? I really didn't know because of the hole I had dug for myself. In my weakened condition, I was afraid it would be nearly impossible for us to find a path of mutual understanding. When I was invited to share my part of the story, I pulled myself together as much as I could and said, I feel terrible about walking out. I just couldn't see any other choice at the time. I had decided that no matter how hard I tried, I could never measure up to what you or anyone else expected of me. I honestly believed that you'd be better off without me. Once I left, I was afraid to come home because I was afraid that if I did, I'd be expected to pull my act together when I can't even put my teeth together without chattering. By now, the shaking and chattering had returned, and the room was pregnant with more than our unborn child. Hurt and anger swarmed around us like restless bees, while we tried desperately to find some basis for repairing the seemingly enormous rift that had developed. Dan, I concluded, I feel your love is conditional on my performance, and I don't feel I can perform any longer. Dan assured me that he had been unaware that I was feeling that way, and that he'd never intended to hurt me. Given my state of mind, I wasn't sure that I processed anything much that was said, but I did feel comfortable enough to remain at home. They'll be better off without me. After our friend left, I went back to bed in our quiet house. I lay there wondering why God wouldn't just release me. Everything I had lived for during the past several years had vanished like a shattered dream. My preschool and daycare, my daughters, my husband, my church jobs, my everything. As the days progressed, even my household duties had to be taken over. I was left with emptiness and a terrible void, and I thought of what life after death might be like. It must offer more than these indescribable feelings of weakness that I now felt. Surely God knew that I was no longer capable of a meaningful marriage, yet divorce was out of the question. Still, I couldn't stay where I wasn't qualified, wanted, or even needed. Dan and I seemed to be light years apart emotionally, and although the girls seemed to need and love me, I had nothing left to give them. I was lonely on an island of people. Although I wanted to be relieved of my immense emotional suffering, my desire for release revolved around my belief that Dan would be better off without me. I truly believed that my husband and beautiful children deserved better. It was during this time that I recorded in my journal, quote, "I don't want to kill myself, but I don't want to go on living either." My sickness was so humiliating. A few days later, while my mother-in-law was watching the kids, I heard muted sounds outside my bedroom door as I lay staring at the ceiling. I heard the hushed voices of my two girls, ages 5 and 3, and their grandmother's gentle warning, "You need to keep quiet. Your mother is sick." Rolling over in the watered bed, I buried my face the best I could in the pillow. If my sickness had come as a result of an accident or injury, I could have accepted it and played the part of the courageous woman. Instead, my illness was entirely invisible deep within my soul. The phrases like nervous breakdown used to describe my condition. I wondered how I could ever go on wearing that awful label of mental illness for the rest of my life. But I still love you. Our church leader made an appointment with a counselor for us. Within a week after my return, I was taken into the office first, and then Dan followed. We were there less than an hour when we were advised, "I think you'd probably be better off divorced." As we left his office, we were silent. Divorce had never been in either of our plans or dreams or vocabularies with each other. As we drove the 3 miles to Dan's parents' house to pick up the kids, I felt as though we had been handed spoiled meat, and I wanted to toss it far from me. The car settled on the driveway, and I unrolled the window a bit and sat out in the car with Dan. It was then that we really talked for the first time since I had come back about the possibility of divorce. "You probably would be better off finding someone else who isn't so emotional or not such a bad housekeeper and mother," I said. The air stood still outside the windows. I felt like the late autumn grass and trees turned their ears to catch the latest gossip. Dan rubbed his hand across his face and then held the steering wheel with a vice-like grip. He turned to me and said, "I still love you. Despite it all, I still love you, Patty." The breeze confirmed the truth of his statement, and I knew that he was sincere.